Hi, and welcome to the very first episode of a new podcast that we like to call Wait, Hold Up, What? It's brought to you from the women at Eliminate Girl Hate. I am the owner of Eliminate Girl Hate, Dawn Hanks, and also your host for this podcast. So let's take a moment to imagine a world where you're at school, work, out with friends, family, colleagues, you name it. And someone says or does something that makes you stop in your tracks. You tilt your head and you say, wait, hold up, what? They're the moments that make us question our choices. We wonder, are we in the wrong job, the right direction, the right partner? Did we know our friends the way we thought we did? Or even those moments that we ask, what happened to that person to make them think that saying or doing something like that is okay? They're the moments that send us into the arms of our closest ally to commiserate over what we should do, how we should have responded, or even just to mourn that loss of something or someone that we thought we had. Sometimes they're even the moments that make us question if we're the ones who are wrong or they are. Throughout my life, I have been keenly aware of how many of these moments occurred through the lens of gender. It's the inappropriate comment or the inappropriate action or even an old fashioned perspective that's based on long held beliefs that women and girls are less than, that we don't deserve as much, the same voice, the same recognition, the same position. I could go on. And while I noticed those things throughout my life, it was a single moment at work where it all came rushing in like this tsunami. And I couldn't ignore it or brush it off any longer. And so I had to make a change. And I did. I quit my job. I started a company and I decided to work in a space that helped to empower women and help to make those moments where you say, wait, hold up, what? Less frequent, if you will. So for our first episode, I decided to share that moment with the woman who helped to jumpstart my career. Her name is Becky Wilkinson. She is a career game changer who in 2004 took a chance on me. Becky has more than 30 years of executive experience building global operations, mitigating conflict in the workplace, and excavating meaningful opportunities that drive process improvements and increase employee engagements. A 20-year veteran of Oakley, Becky actually established the company's prescription eyewear business. The lens technology she pioneered made possible the world's first wrapped lens prescription eyewear. It led to a $100 million a year worldwide revenue opportunity for the company, and it's only grown since her time there. Throughout her journey in male dominated environments, she faced and successfully navigated untold challenges. Her experience fueled that determination to be an advocate for women's empowerment and diversity and inclusion for many. I owe a lot to Becky. She believed in me before I did and introduced me not just to the idea of a job, but a career, which is something that before then, quite frankly, I didn't even dream big enough to imagine. She showed me what it means to be empowered by other women and have someone in your corner at work. It has been 15 years since we last spoke, and we got to talk about things that we remember in a really wonderful way, and some of the things we remember in a not so wonderful way. We talk about those experiences that we both remember, and maybe some of the things behind the scenes that neither of us knew the other was struggling with. We're going to start this episode with a question I heard that changed it all for me. What would you do if a high ranking executive at your company, let's say your boss's boss, said to you in a meeting, I don't know why we even hire women in leadership positions. We're a men's company. Not only do we discuss this moment, but we talk about things like how walking around in your underwear can build confidence and what it means to work with other supportive women, plus so much more. So welcome. We are so glad you're here, and we can't wait to share this story and so many more from everyday women and their experiences with career, life, love, self, worth, and so many more topics. I'm delighted to introduce you to Becky Wilkinson and welcome you here to Wait, Hold Up, What? Let's get started. Did you know that 80% of the world's purchases are influenced and made by women? or that 90% of product development, manufacturing, and corporate leadership is led by men? I don't know about you, but that seems like some funky, disconnected math. This disconnect means large segments of the population are not getting their needs met because the products being made never even asked us what problems we needed to solve. Instead, companies use a pink it and shrink it philosophy. Not familiar? I bet you are. You know it. Take a man's product, make it smaller, paint it pink, sell it for 25% more. Then, when the products fail to make a dent in the market or to sell rapidly, they say things like, the market wasn't ready. Or, we were so sure it was going to work, I wonder what happened. And then they move on. I'm here to tell you, the market is most definitely ready. But the market is savvy, and putting some paint and saying it was designed for us is a slap in the face. We have real needs, and we're not settling for anything less than real solutions. If this sounds familiar to you and your business, then it's time to connect with Eliminate Girl Hate. We help businesses understand the lucrative consumer segment of women and how to meet their needs in authentic ways. From problem solving, product creation, marketing, and even human resource practices, we help create safe and equitable spaces for the female segment. And these safe spaces increase profit margins, employee retention, and brand loyalty along the way. It's time to start a revolution and meet your consumers where they are. It's time to eliminate girl hate. Check us out, eliminategirlhate.com, and find out how we can help your business today. We are sponsored by Epiphany Recording Studio. Creativity needs to flow freely if you want to reach that aha moment that we're all looking for. At Epiphany Recording Studio, their goal is to create space that takes full advantage of those moments. From podcast and video production to music creation, you get the support you need to create compelling stories with a competitive sound. Your ideas can flow freely because they partner with you free of judgment, ready to be vulnerable, do the work, and make your projects look and sound their best. So let Epiphany Recording Studio help you reach your artistic vision by visiting them today at epiphanyrecordingstudio.com. Tell them Dawn sent you. For the people that may not know who you are, tell us your name and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Becky Wilkinson. My pronouns are she, her. I have almost 4 decades experience in the working environment, spanning private, public, private equity, nonprofits, small organizations, startups to multi-billion-dollar organizations. So have had the pleasure of working with, I would say, thousands of men and women, both as a direct teammate and or a direct leader, as well as a subordinate and peer and just simply coworker. And so navigating through the work environment and all that exists from that and the evolution of women's role in the workplace and level of respect in the workplace is something that I've had firsthand knowledge and exposure to and made mistakes and learned from them, and just really delighted to be here with you today.
So for the listeners, Becky and I used to work together many years ago. I met Becky in 2004, and I actually really like to tell the story of how we met because I get asked a lot about my career journey, especially for younger women coming into the workforce and like, how did you get these jobs or how did you work for these companies? And I think everybody expects you to have some really crazy story and like, I worked and someone really saw my work and said, you deserve this and we're going to give you all this money and this great job and go for it. And it's that easy. And my experience was quite different. I'm originally from Portland, Oregon, and I had moved to California for a job. So when I got to California, the job that was promised to me didn't exist. And so I had got bamboozled a little bit. And my mother had called me and said, come home. I'll send you a plane ticket. We'll figure out about your stuff later. And I said, I came here to work in marketing, so I want to give it 6 months. If it doesn't work, I can go home and we can figure it out. And so I was working at a lot of temp jobs in the meantime while I was looking. And my younger sister got a job at Oakley working in customer service. And the recruiting agency asked her if she knew anybody else. And she said, my sister, but she's probably not going to do customer service. She has a little bit more work experience. sent my resume in. They sent me up for an interview with you. What they told me was that it was for a sales and marketing coordinator role. And then I got there, and as you were interviewing me, it was very clear that was not what you were looking for. You had an administrative assistant who was leaving on maternity leave, and you needed somebody to fill in that spot. And so, in one of I now know my more brave moments of outspokenness, I stopped you in the middle of the interview and I said, "This sounds like a really cool place. I certainly never walked in a building like this, but I am in California to do this. And it sounds like there was a miscommunication. So thank you very much." And I walked out the door. I was staying on a cot at my grandparents' house, which was about a mile down the road from the office. And I got a call from you about an hour, maybe two max later. And you said, "What if I make you a deal?" And I was like, "Okay." And you said, "You got to work. So why don't you come work and fill this role for me? And I'll give you 3 marketing projects. And if you do them well, I will find you a role here." And I was very professional and buttoned up and said, "Let me think about it and I'll call you tomorrow because that's what you're supposed to do." But I was like, okay, I need to make money. Like, at least it gives me a job in the meantime and all of those things. And I called you the next day and took the job. That is more or less exactly what happened. I did the work for the 3 months that Carrie was on maternity leave. You gave me a catalog, you gave me a photo shoot, and you gave me a party at a trade show to do. And when Carrie came back, you said, "Okay, I haven't got approval yet, but you'll just stay on my team for right now and we'll just keep doing projects." Within 5 months, you allowed me to write my job description and my job title, which was ridiculous. It was acronymed to be spam, which later in life is quite hilarious to me, but it was sales, PR, marketing, advertising, all of that. And 1 month later, you sent me to Italy to a trade show. And I never even dreamed of other countries. Like, my biggest dream was to go to New York my whole life. Like, I wanted to be on Broadway. I wanted to do the whole nine. And so, like this, I jumped over a chair. I physically jumped over a chair in the office when you told me I was going to Italy. At the time, it was the most money I'd ever made. And really, the reason I say that story is, number one, because there was no reason you should have made that offer to me. None whatsoever. Did I have a nice resume? Sure. But was it great? Did you have any guarantees? No. But there was something in your gut that said, "I think this could work." And you followed that and you did it. I got a job. I like to tell people I got a career out of that first thing. And also, you were very coachy. I don't know, that's the wrong word because that sounds bad, but you very much were like, "Oh, you don't know how to do that? Let's talk about it. Let's do it." I say that to, number one, say thank you. I don't know if you know that was how it happened for me, but also to start us off with a question. And that is, at that point in time, we're talking 20 years ago, 2004, what was it at that part of your career that gave you permission to follow your gut? Not with me necessarily, but just as a general practice.
Well, first I need to clarify something, because you had just said there was no reason that I should have given you the offer, which I call bullshit on. You showed up, you shared your enthusiasm, your passion came through, and there's the surface piece of it, right? And how you present, but then there's the actions and whether or not they match to the words, and your actions exceeded your words, right? You came to the table with creative ideas that allowed us to do things we hadn't done before, with a gift that I don't have, right? And I recognize that in you. And so don't sell yourself short. And there was no reason. You were the reason, right? Your passion, your experience, everything you brought to that moment is the reason that opportunity presented itself for you. What gave me the ability to do that? At that point, I had been with the company for 14 years, right? So I had equity in credibility and was empowered to make decisions because the collective group of the prescription team was delivering results. And as the leader of that group, I recognized the currency in that, right? That had been built from delivering again and again against really no expectations. The prescription eyewear story started in 1990 when an athlete wanted to be able to wear the M frames and they needed corrective eyewear. And I think somewhat as a flippant, let's just see what Becky can do. The CEO at the time, who I had gone to and said, give me more, I'm ready for more. What else can I do? I had been supporting the sales team with new account packets. I had been responding to customer service letters, cataloging testimonials from people who had worn the glasses and had some accident happen that the glasses protected them from, that strengthened the arguments our legal team was able to have in securing patents and defending against the competition. And so I had rattled enough cages for them to recognize maybe Becky can do it. And so I was brought into a room with the CEO who said, all right, you said you want to do more. We need to make prescription eyewear. Are you up for the challenge? And I said, absolutely. And there was 4 instructions. He wrote them on a whiteboard. Figure out how to make it, figure out how to sell it, figure out how to ship it, and make sure we get our money for it. And that was it. Go do it. And so free reign to figure out the things. And we did it. It happened. We had a very successful product that continued to expand in interest and demand and technology, and the portfolio grew and the team grew. And so, long story to that question is, I had the currency to be able to make the changes because we had delivered results over and over again. And I always was looking for people like me who knew in their heart what they wanted to do, but were brand spanking new to it and needed to figure it out and just needed someone to help advocate for them and empower them to shine. And that's exactly what you did.
Thank you. That question was not meant to receive a compliment in return, but it begs the question that I think a lot of people would ask. Now, first of all, I knew that story. I forgot a little bit about the whiteboard and the 4 things, but the second you were like, I was like, I know what's happening. Going to somebody high up in a company that had a name and had a following and had all of these things. So was there something in your youth or growing up that made you believe you could rattle cages, to use your word? Because a lot of people don't feel confident or comfortable going to somebody with some big fancy title and saying, give me more, right? I'm ready for more. So did you grow up in an environment where it was okay to voice that, where it's okay to state your needs? Like, what do you think caused that for you to be able to do that?
Yeah, for me, there's 2 parts to it. One was my background, I'll speak to, and then the other was the safe space that was created for me by the leader who invited me to that. But there's a funny story in between those 2 that I'll also share. So I am the granddaughter of a Holocaust survivor. I am the oldest of 3 girls. My mother was a very strong advocate for human rights as a whole, women's rights being included in that. And so standing up for ourselves and speaking our truth. Certainly when you're younger, you just speak up. You don't really know what your truth is, right? But you're venting it. And so we had that as a foundation, and complemented by a father who was adoring of all of us, all 3 of my sisters and I, and challenged us to think about the big pictures. What do you think the meaning of life is? That was like are you happy? And what do you think the meaning of life is? Was a repeat question when we would go for weekend walks at Mission Bay down in San Diego or do picnics. So it was just constantly thinking and checking, am I happy? And if not, what am I going to do to change it? Because I've got control over it. And what do I think the meaning of life is? So that you're thinking bigger picture, not just the day-to-day grind of, whatever the routine is. So I came to Oakley with that foundation.
Sorry to interrupt you, but what did your dad do for a living?
So my father was the wizard of stress. He had his degree in psychology, and he spoke to doctors and nurses and other professionals, but predominantly in the medical industry, to help them understand and be in tune with when they were feeling the anxiety or the pressure and how to work through it. And so
Wow.
my sisters and I were raised with that also as a somewhat of a foundation, like recognize the energy you bring into a room, recognize the energy from other people, and choose how you want to respond to it.
What a progressive role to have at that time period. Like, we barely talk about that now.
And it's
Wow.
fascinating. He no longer is with us, but all of his teachings are still with us. And when we went through, we knew that he was going to pass. He had squamous cell carcinoma of the head and neck. That took him out, but we knew that it was happening. And so we were able to spend the time with him and say everything we wanted to say and share all the funny stories and the admirations both ways, really. And plan for what was going to happen. And in that planning, just again, what do you think the meaning of life is? And it's not work. At
Mhm.
the end of the day, you're not going to regret you didn't polish that presentation better or, handle a meeting differently. It will be the time that you spent with the people that you love. And that's what you're going to wish you had more of. So resetting that for me later in life, that didn't happen during my Oakley days. Was for
I
me.
was going to say, wait a minute. How does that, my recollection of you is of a very driven person, a person very, work was a large portion of your life. And yes, you had kids and a husband, and I am in no way implying that you didn't pay attention to both, but it was very clear that you were a driven person. And sometimes those two ideas or ideals, if you will, don't always mesh, right? So finding that balance becomes very difficult.
It needed to change. And I didn't realize that it needed to change because I was in the mode of people are counting on me. There's work to be done. This is how I identified myself, even though I was a mother of 3 children. And my husband said to me one day, "We're getting your leftovers." It hit me like a freaking brick in the head. And about that time is when my father had been diagnosed. And so he's talking about, I wish I would have had more time with you. I wish I would have done this and that with you. That's what that, and you hear that when you read stories of other people. That was not
Yeah.
specific to him, but that's just general. And it, it stopped me in my tracks. And there was things happening at Oakley at that time. I had been doing the same thing for so darn long and I wanted to do something else and they wouldn't let me do anything else. And so I was somewhat stuck and we had gone to be acquired, right? In the parent company, they were experts in the prescription industry and they didn't want to hear from this up and coming, from this young lady who
Yeah.
had built it herself and didn't come with the pedigree. And it is still an anchor for me today. Was it just a North Star? But the second part of that question of what happened, how did that translate to what was happening at work? The CEO at the time was phenomenal, Mike Parnell. And some people hated him, some people loved him. You're going to find that with anyone, right? But I loved him because he was legit, like he was just authentic in what he did. He gave people the opportunities to do not whatever they wanted, but certainly if they were hungry for more, he presented those opportunities to them. I had gone back years after he left Oakley to thank him for giving me the opportunity and believing in me. And his comment was, I just gave you the rope and it was yours to take to the next level or hang yourself, right? And you took it beyond. But when I started, I was very intimidated by him. So I was 21 years old and I would find myself going and talking with him and I was prepared, but I would start shaking. I would feel that nervous energy and then I wouldn't say what I wanted or I would just leave feeling like embarrassed about it. And so I needed to figure out a way to overcome that self anxiety. Now, these were the days where there were no cameras around. These were the days where we came in on the weekends to get work. I was there on the weekends quite often. And this was before the building that you're referring to, which is today the headquarters and this great, phenomenal design. This was just a standard office. And in this standard office upstairs, he had an open desk because he wanted to sit and see, he was present, right? And when the new office was built originally, he had that open design as well, which just let everyone know I'm here and I'm approachable. He had a separate office when he needed to have some privacy. But one Saturday afternoon when no one else was in the office and I had ridden my bike in and I was in the bathroom changing, I thought, all right, I know what I'm going to do. And I walked out in my underwear with nothing else on, and I sat in his chair, got behind his desk. I sat in his chair and I put my feet up on the desk, and I created a new perspective for me that then eliminated that nervous energy. The next time I met with him, I pictured myself sitting in that chair, and it, for me, fixed. I haven't done that again, certainly. Anybody in today's day and age, there are cameras everywhere, there are people everywhere, but I recognize that I was putting some pressure on myself that I needed to overcome, and I needed to change the perspective that I had of this person in power, because he was just a person and I didn't need to be nervous about that.
That's
I never
amazing.
said that to anybody else, but
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like I know a lot of the stories about you, but I did not know that one. It in no way surprises me. Then Oakley's been around for quite a long time, but it was small for a very long time. And even, gosh, even when it was purchased, in the grand scheme of things, it was a pretty small company from a people perspective. And so it was the kind of place you worked where you did know everybody and everybody knew you, especially in your early days. But even when I went there, it was very much that way, right? So there was in one way this massive visibility. And then in another way, the space to find some cubbies and some holes to do some things undercover, which sounds bad, but it was like, unless you were, so prescription eyewear being the department that we worked in, when people dream of working for a sports company, they do not dream of being in the prescription eyewear department, right? So even when I was hired, there was such a, we used to refer to it in a way I don't really like to refer to things now, but it was definitely like the stepchild of the business. And you weren't as cool if you worked in there. And one of the things I think you and I were very aligned on without words was, oh, this is opportunity. Because this is a wide open playing field that nobody else wants.
Yeah.
So if they're going to give me the rope, because it's a rope they don't care about, whew, I'm going to do a lot of stuff with that rope, right? And I'm going to take it and I'm going to run with it.
Right.
And I think that is a unique personality trait for some people to be able to do that. But it did seem like we had a lot of those people surrounding us, right?
Yeah, yeah. If it, there were a lot of cool dudes, and those cool dudes didn't need glasses at that time, but the industry did, the marketplace
Sure did.
in spades beyond that of sunglasses, and it allowed the organization not only to reach those customers, but I think it made the organization more appealing to the parent company that came and bought it. So
Of course it did.
I think significantly influenced the fact that we were acquired. I think it also was very favorable when the company decided to go public prior to being.
Of course.
The success of the prescription eyewear business in margin and in growth, not in total volume, not in total size of business, but the speed with which we were growing, the margin that we were delivering was significantly greater than the sunglass business.
And the opportunity. It's such a big business. And I haven't been there in a while, but back then it was something like 7 out of 10 people in the world needed corrective eyewear. So it's like your opportunity for business is really big. Yeah. So you have a boss that encourages you. You have male influences in your life that encourage you to speak your mind, to go after what you want. What about female influences? Did your mother work?
She did. She wrote grants. My parents divorced when I was 10. So as a single mom, she identified a need for on campus school, after school daycare. And it didn't exist. And so she found a few partners and built an organization that advocated for on-campus programs. This is pre-YMCA days, and wrote grants to get the funding so that other women would have the opportunities that she wanted to have, and children would have safe space on campus in an educational flair, fun but educational. And she was working as long as I can. I mean, I don't remember really pre the age of 10, but her whole life, and advocating for others and loving what she did. So she was certainly a significant influence. My grandmother was also a very significant influence. My mom had a couple best friends, Auntie Bonnie and Joanne, who were just powerhouse women. One ran for governor, in San Diego, another one, or city council woman, another one was a principal at a school. These were role models that I saw growing up. That's just, to me, was just reality. That's how it is, not realizing they were part of a generation that was breaking the mold of a male only. And so I started that with the foundation. I had some kind leaders in early jobs. I also saw women in leadership positions being oppressed. And so I observed and kind of, not kind of, I took note to that. The
Sure.
Oakley days, my inspiration was from the women that inspired me in my Oakley days, are the women I had the opportunity to work with specifically on the team, right? So
Of course.
you and Terry and Jen and Christina and Carrie, and really there's so many. There was phenomenal men also, but the source of female power was
Yeah.
from those individuals, you
Yeah.
included. I had great men on the team also, but both of those that I found to be most significant in their contribution had a side hustle that they felt that they could be better than me at the job. And
Hmm.
they both pitched to the senior leadership male at the time that prescription should be broken out, that they should have a piece of it, I should have a piece of it. And not being in that room, I'm so grateful for the leaders that were in the room at that time telling them no, and brought me in to say, Becky, we want you to hear what these guys are saying. And so
Yeah.
it taught me to be careful who I trust, and to make very clear what my role is and own that role. After leaving Oakley, I spent some time with the kids, and room mom and PTA president and district mentor, and organized school carnivals and that kind of fun stuff. And I had some phenomenal women I had the opportunity to work with through that period of my life as well. And then I went back into corporate America. The kids are older, and I joined a company that is a private equity brokerage, double the size of Oakley, that was run by women. And the onboarding video was of the CEO, who is sharing what her views are. She had a very well-known story about coming up through the ranks to ultimately earn the CEO title, sitting in a boardroom around, surrounded by men, and saying, half of you are leaving because at least half of this room needs to be women, and just making it just very clear that she was going to prioritize an equal playing field in the workspace. And I was hired by a woman who worked for a woman who then reported to the woman. And the dynamic was so much different. And this woman that I worked for, Andrea Young, my favorite boss ever, because she believed in me, and she gave me not just the rope to do whatever, but her advocacy for my ability to do more than I realized I could do. And so she would bring me in on really fun projects. Figure out, we're doing demos in the Kroger stores. You go to Costco and they hand out the samples. And so one of the things that this organization, Advantage Solutions, does is provide that support between the brands and the businesses. And there was a desire to try a virtual experience in the store, and Alexa was new. And can we customize Alexa to provide an experience that then gets set up in a grocery store, an interactive experience? Becky, can you figure that out? Like, we have the Amazon reps coming now, and I had been with the company maybe a month. And I sat in the room, I did the intake, and in 60 days, I developed with them a prototype that she was able to bring to market. And the projects then just continued to grow. They were more HR related. So figure out how to organize the team, to set up succession planning, to identify the strengths in individuals. But what I love about what this leader did that I didn't experience before was really very simple. Was she trusted me. And so she was transparent with me. She would just here's a problem. What do we want to do? And we work through it together. She listened to me.
Mm.
and she believed in me. And I was able to do more than I even thought possible. And I loved it. And I just fed off of that. And so just built some really great momentum.
Sure.
So the power of female influences in my life, I'm definitely humbled.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned all of the women at Oakley, and we did have a unique department in that respect. At that time, there were not a lot of women that were there, and we had this group, and it was everywhere we went, we were referred to as the optical ladies or the optical girls or whatever kind of context that was given to us. But for me in my life, that was one of the first times I was actually surrounded by other females. I didn't necessarily have a lot of female friends. I wasn't a slumber party girl growing up or those types of things. While I have both brothers and sisters, the ones closest to me in age were boys. And so, my brother was my best friend and all of those things. And so it was the first time I had really been around women. I am a person who has a theme for every year of my life because I'm a weirdo.
I love it.
And in the most beautiful way, right? I'm a beautiful weirdo because if it's good enough for Disney, it's good enough for me, right? And when I had moved there, I really struggled with California. It wasn't my environment. It wasn't culturally what I was used to. And meeting those women and working with those women really helped. And my theme that year was the year of fun, the year of ladies, because I was very good at naming things back then. And that was what it was. It was just we all had experiences together and experienced things we had never done. It led to some other ways in which I still currently live my life that really focuses on doing things you've never done. And that if there's an inkling of you that wants to do something, you got to do it, right? And it's not about a bucket list. It's not about planning to die. It's about choosing to live, right? And not letting fear get in the way of that. I had 3 rules. One was if you think people are going to come back from whatever this is, I'll use whitewater rafting as an example. If I don't want to do that, I'm terrified of water and waves and all of those kinds of things. But if the whole team came back and was talking about how much fun they had, I was going to struggle with that. And I knew it. So it was on my list as something I would have to do and face, right? You had to photograph it. You had to write about it. And those were my rules to open myself up to the possibilities. And I really learned that's a good approach to work as well, or whatever your work is, right? Whatever that looks like, is rather than letting fear or this unknown stop you from doing it, lean into it if you think you would want to be part of that. And I think, especially in its early days, that's something that a culture like Oakley, but also this culture, when you talked about working with this woman, that allows for. We don't see it often in employment culture where you are given the space to fail and test and try, even if maybe you are not the person who is perfectly fit for the role. And it's really shaped how I look at hiring as well. I believe that if you check off every box of a job application or a job description, then you're already overqualified for the role. Because if you are not learning, if you are not being challenged in a role, right, you've already surpassed that and where you should be in that. And I think that's something that shines through even in those expressions of who supported you and how they supported you. They weren't looking for somebody that thought exactly like them or had the answers that they already had. You just had a different way of looking at things, and they thought maybe that could get us somewhere. And they trusted that and gave space for that. I think that's really important. And I think we're missing it, especially in today's highly competitive job market.
Well, I don't know how much of it, though, is, I think I would guess the majority of it is self-inflicted. So we women in general hold ourselves to a higher standard in whether or not we think we're worthy, and then whether or not we think we delivered. And the good part of that is we will go above and beyond expectations as a general broad brush statement. But the negative of it is, fuck, we're holding ourselves back. Like,
Yeah.
it is
Yeah.
this self-inflicted wound that we need to be aware of and we need to address, and only individually can we do it. I want to circle back on something you said about this, the RX girls, or this
Yeah.
our team of women that we were there was magic because
Mhm.
we could lean on each other and we motivated each other and we supported each other. It was a tremendous threat to the men. And their response was, can I say fucked up? It was just like their response was to encourage others to disagree with me, to
Yes.
break from what we had built, to break from, what it was important that I wanted to have a bubble of sorts, a protective layer so that you go do what you're going to do and you're going to make mistakes and I'm going to cover. And that brought me joy, enabled greater success than I could have ever imagined. But it was seen as a threat to
Yes.
men who did not have the same, who directly sabotaged. And being a younger leader at that time, I got tricked into it. And there was conflict. This beautiful dream team, had this interjection and men in my ear saying, well, did you know that so and so, did you, and trying to sabotage and doing the same on the other side. And there was this splintering that happened that, in hindsight, I wish I would have been more firm to hold my position and recognize the value of what we had and not get caught up in what really was somebody else's problem and somebody else's, the men, these particular men, this isn't a broad brush all men, but just these particular dudes needed to have more of a sense of power, and they,
Yeah.
they disrupted a good thing. So being aware of that and recognizing in any future state, for me or for anybody who's listening, if intuitively, if you feel in your heart and your gut that this is right, and somebody is coming and saying, oh, but you shouldn't trust this person, or, oh, but did you know, push back and
Yeah.
really stay true to what you know in your heart and your gut. Don't let people manipulate that.
It's interesting. So my tenure there was twice. I had left to finish a degree, basically, is what I did. And it was more expensive to stay in California than to go back to Portland. And I gave you 4 months notice. I cried every single day of those 4 months because I didn't want to leave. Like, I didn't know work could be this good. And I didn't know maybe that people would see me, if that makes sense, at that stage of my career, that it was like, oh, she can do something, she has something there, right? I was a kid who, I'm the oldest of six, and they are all very wonderful and talented, and most of that talent really showed itself when they were young. So it was so obvious right away. My talents were not as easily recognizable. At least that was the narrative that I had, right?
Right.
And I really struggled with it. And we like to laugh at this in my family, but I'd call my mom crying and I'd be like, they're all so good at so many things and I'm not good at anything. And she would, when I was at Oakley the first time, she would say, your talent is business. And I would not really yell because I'm not a yeller, but I'd be like, that is not a talent, Mom. I can't talk to you. It just flustered me. And I think it's interesting when companies are in growth phases, right? The growth that often gets them to where they are and all of these good things, those same qualities that they use to create that growth often get thrown to the wayside once they get to a certain level, and the stakes are higher now, right? So I ended up coming back for a second tenure, and again was afforded a really good opportunity to start something that didn't exist before, which was great. And I did a lot of things. I had a lot of wins. I had a lot of, I don't want to call them failures, but I'll say I had a lot of lessons of it in that time. And there is something in corporate culture that does pit people against each other. I think it's just our global culture in general, where there's this idea that somebody has to be the best or somebody has to be better, and we can't just all be good or good at different things and support each other. But I found myself in a position where, your background is so interesting because there was a lot of visibility to strong women and to women who worked and to just people that maybe spoke their mind and all of those things. My upbringing was a little bit different than that, right? And so there was a lot of things I didn't see. I really thought that my life was going, I thought that I was going to be like the manager of a phone center, right? Or the manager at a restaurant. All very respectable jobs, but likely not something that someone dreams of doing, right? Even if you're great at it and you love your job currently. But I just didn't see bigger than that. And so I didn't dream that. But the flip side was I was always a very opinionated child and person. I was a person who really thrived and blossomed in ideation and brainstorming and like, what if? Like, I did have that about me, right? And I now have visibility to. I was always very much about justice, fairness, equality, equity. I was the kid who was protesting. Like my first protest was in seventh grade. I led it. I got a soda machine taken out of the school because at the time the company supported apartheid in South Africa, and I very much cared about that. I led walkouts against the Gulf War. I was just that kind of a kid without really knowing what it meant or that that other people weren't that way. I really didn't see that. And so I never was, I don't know if I would have identified as a feminist or as a person who fought for women's rights, right? But I definitely fought against things I didn't think were appropriate. And so there were a lot of things I missed as you progress, you become a teenager, things that happen to a lot of women, abuse, assault, things like that. I never equated it to my womanhood or femininity or being a woman. But working in that environment, I really started to pick up and notice things that were gendered. That we were called the Oakley girl or the RX girls, right? That there were people, to what you said, that were trying to create division where there didn't need to be, or trying to minimize the work that was being done because it's just a bunch of girls who are on a pet project. There were lots of spreading of rumors about people that had nothing to do with work, lots of rumors about how people express themselves sexually, promiscuity, things of that nature, right? To try to create that division and things, which was just crazy.
Yeah, but to belittle, right?
Yes,
So I
yes.
think that a lot of
Yes.
it comes from this sense of fear that they're going to lose power, whomever that
Yeah.
individual is, rather than recognize, oh no, if I support this individual, my power will grow, right? So
Yeah.
part of it was insecurity and fear that drove
Yeah.
it. Right? I think this happened before you came, but I was leading the prescription eyewear business, had been for many years. We had an apparel division launched as well. There was a woman leading it at that time. We went to a sales meeting in Mexico, and we have meetings all day long, like a traditional sales meeting, and then a big party at the night as traditional. And this big party was on a boat. And everybody was there, a couple hundred salespeople and individuals who were speaking because we got to go through marketing or the product stuff. And the VP of sales or SVP, whatever, the guy in charge of sales at that time grabbed me and grabbed the other female leader and stood us at one end of this boat, and then went and found what he thought was the least attractive salesperson, man, and sat him in a chair at the other end of the boat and had the microphone. So he got everybody's attention. And he said, okay, the two of you women are each going to do your sexiest dance to the sales rep. And then we will all decide which one of you is better at tempting your man. And the two of us looked at each other and turned and walked away. But that shit doesn't fly today. But it was very clear in that moment, ha ha ha, he thought he was being funny. It was an intent to delegitimize what we were doing and the role that we played in the organization. And unfortunately, that it doesn't play out that directly and that ugly anymore, but there are certainly subtleties in the work environment that men and women need to be aware of. Again, it's predominantly to women,
Yeah.
but there are some men that are exposed to that as well.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I know theoretically those things do not happen anymore or don't fly today. But they really do. And I was working at a place in which I should preface that when you work in certain industries, the lines are blurrier than others, right? Now, one, that can be the industry, right? You're in entertainment, you're in sports, you're in music. There are these things where just lines of personal and professional blur. But it's also like the size and the way in which a company builds, right? Before real HR, before these things, before they go public, and there are different kind of rules. But we had a sales meeting, a global sales meeting, and a pair of people ended up having a physical relationship. And for all intents and purposes, it was a consensual relationship. And yet the next day, the conversation was about the woman.
Mhm.
And how no one could take that person serious any longer, how maybe she shouldn't lead her department. The male who was involved, it was just, this person was very much known for that type of thing. And it was just, oh, that's just so and so. I mean, it was rampant through the building how much we supposedly knew about the encounter. And it is things like that. It's these small stories that you hear that you start to think, oh, my sister also worked there. So I was very big sistery or mama bear with her. And look, you're cute, you're young, you're all of these things that men are going to maybe try to put you in compromising situations. And I didn't say men, I said the men, there are certain men here that will do that. And so you need to be really careful. Like you got to do this, you got to do this. And I cringe thinking that now because it was putting so much of the onus on her. And then the reason that we are even having this conversation is I was in a meeting and it was with my equals and also the powers that be above us. And there were layers of that. And the highest ranking person in the room said out loud, why do we hire female in leadership positions? We are not a female brand, we're a male brand. It makes absolutely no sense. And when I tell you that you could literally hear the sounds of necks snapping to
Right.
look at me. Now, I was not the only woman in the room. There were two others. They were at the same level as I was. But it was definitely people thought I would have a reaction. Now, in all fairness, I am very much an emotional person. I do not say that in a negative at all, even though the world wants me to think that it is. I'm actually staring at a poster right now that I have in my office from the wonderful Brad Montague. And even though my glasses are off, I will just tell you a little bit, but it basically says, don't cry because it's over. Cry because it's a completely normal thing to cry and have emotions about something, right? And so I just want to clarify that because I'm not saying, oh, dang it, I have emotions. But that was how it was viewed. There was a negativity about that in the office. And everybody looked at me for what I was going to say because they just assumed I was going to go off.
You were the advocate. You were the advocate in the room that people were counting on
Yep.
because you're brave. And they recognize that. And the hypocrisy of a man who says in a company, why do we have women when we're a men's brand? Knowing that this men's brand is selling women's eyewear. And for the longest time, it was a man designing the women's eyewear while the women were banging their heads against the wall. Like, why? Like, not because the man was not capable, but because he lacked the perspective to understand what the buyer would want just from life experience. And so it's just this really narrow, one sided.
Yeah. It's if I had to wear a monster doggle one more time in my life, just to look it up, it was not the most attractive eyewear for me. But yes, I agree with that. And it wasn't as if I hadn't heard things inappropriate before. I had heard very inappropriate things while working there and seen very inappropriate things, been proposition, like lots of inappropriate things, right? But there was something about that moment that was a lightning rod for me. And I started to speak to make sure I understood what was being said. And one of the men in the room interjected which has its own set of nuances that's hilarious, and said, "Oh, I'm so glad that Dawn and these other two women work here because they really help me sell women's eyewear." And I looked over and I said, "In all due respect, I realize you are trying to jump to my defense and save me, but I do not need a savior,
Mm.
especially one who uses an example that just proves that I do more work than them. Because you do not have to help me sell men's eyewear. I
Mhm.
have to sell both on my own and market both on my own because that is the products and services that we sell. So you just explain that I do more work. And yet we have the same title. I'm going to assume you make more money than me because statistics pretty much confirm that."
Yeah.
And I walked out of the room with nothing else. I immediately started crying.
You walk out of the room with your dignity because
Oh,
what was
sure,
said hit the core of who you are. And
sure.
it's just a matter of right and wrong. And it was wrong. And in that moment, I'm so proud of what you did. Like
Thank
there's,
you.
there's power in your choice to get up and leave that situation.
Yeah.
I don't think that women recognize the power that they have, that they are looking for the validation from others when really all along it's inside. And
Yeah.
at that moment, and it's totally appropriate when you feel that emotion or when you are like, I'm not sure how I want to react, but certainly not in this moment. I need some time to think about it. To excuse yourself from the
Yeah.
situation is a very powerful move.
Yeah. I think I get a little choked up. So if you're listening, no apologies for it, but that's where the tone of voice changes. I think that the reason for that is because, excuse me, is because oftentimes bravery from women has repercussions
Mm-hmm.
that it doesn't have other places. And, you know, we want to stand up for what we believe in, but you have to pay the bills and you have to do these things. And I think it is what creates silence in a lot of these situations. But I left the building. I went home. I called two women in my life, one who also worked there, the amazing Stacy. And I apologize if I probably should ask if I can use last names. I'll edit that if I can't. But also my friend Miko, and who I had known since I was like 17 or 18. They both gave me different advice. And it was way opposite. One was like, don't stand for that. You go in, you say your piece, and you bounce. The other one was like, that's just the way that work is. This is what you have to do. And so I spent the evening probably, I shouldn't even say probably. I definitely drank wine that night. Let's just call it what it was. And I really thought about what was my next step and was I prepared for it? And so I went in the next morning. I went into my boss's office and said, I cannot let that be. And so I am going to say something to that person. And I just want to give you a heads up in case there's blowback. And he, to his credit, said, I fully support that. Let me know if you need anything. So I went into that leader's office. I did not make an appointment. I went in. I said, I need a few minutes. And the long and short of it is said, I think that was wholly inappropriate and offensive. You basically told me that I do not have a future here because of my gender, not because of the quality of work that I do. Now, as most people do, they get defensive in a scenario like that. And this person did as well, put their hand up on their chest, as people like to do, because I guess it's emphatic, and said, I would hope you would know that I would never. And I don't really know what he said after that, to be
Didn't
honest with you.
recognize it was a fucking spin, right? Like that.
It totally was a spin. It
And
was
obviously,
totally a spin.
this individual from that reaction was in that same situation. They cross the people that cross lines, cross them repeatedly, and
Yes.
have the stock answer. Oh, feigned upset,
Yes.
surprise.
Put blame elsewhere, right? So in that moment, it was like, oh, well, I speak like this to this leader who is a woman, and they don't seem to have a problem with it. And my response was, then shame on them.
Mhm.
And
Or what like for every individual has their own life experience. Every individual has their own something special. Every individual has their own priorities. And what is important to you is not going to be important to everybody, and
Yeah.
vice versa. And so just identifying your unique set of contributions and values and sensitivities,
Yeah, for sure.
but know that they're yours to own, and know that as you're talking and interacting with other people, because you'll encounter others that are like this, like
Yeah.
recognizing who they are, seeing how they treat other people gives you some clues as to how much of your time and energy you want to share, because
Yeah.
you need to protect it.
I think when you find a place you love professionally, it is very easy to blur the lines. It's very easy to make it your whole life, or maybe even your whole identity.
Mm.
Excuse me, which I think you mentioned earlier as well, right? Like your identity gets wrapped up in your success, right? And
You're giving your identity away. You're in
yes,
the hands of somebody else, and you need to take it back. Like,
yes,
you own it. You have control over it, and you need to recognize the magnificent brilliance that is inside, and nobody can take that away from you. Nobody can diminish that. And I think too often women look for outside validation rather
yes,
than turning internally, and or to those around them that they know they can trust, that are going to
yeah.
look out for their best interest, versus those that trying to make more money and get a new promotion. Right.
Yeah, and have a sense of power, right? I really hate how often we kiss ass to a person who's a leader. Like it's, oh, let me get you a drink and let me do this and let me do this. Like they're a person, they got legs. Like let them go do it, right? But in this instance, I had this voice, right? That was like, that's not enough. And I went to HR, I reported it. Not much happened for whatever reasons. And I'm not always privy to that. So I don't want to place any blame there or anything like that. But at the same time that this was happening, I was traveling quite a bit and I was speaking for or representing our women's line in the talks that I was giving. And I was traveling the country and talking about what I refer to as the economy of gender. So the reasons why women shop, what impacts them, how culturally the roles of women have changed, both from a democratic perspective, from a capitalistic perspective, from work and school and education perspective. And it was all very empowering, right? You're talking about how much power women have. And I had all of this here. And one of the things that I had said when I was expressing my frustration is that women report to me. And so if I don't have a future, neither do they. So how do I coach and offer guidance to them in their career when I know it has a ceiling, right? And so I was speaking on this, I'm going to call it a tour. And I was in North Carolina and I was speaking every day of the week, and they were different environments, and they generally ranged from 30 to 50 people. They were in bars and bowling alleys and all these team building places. And the last session thought it would be the same, but instead of 40 people, 400 showed up. And
Amazing.
they're like opening up the conference room because they had been all from the same business, different offices, and they were calling each other. If you haven't seen this, make sure you get the last one, which, wow,
Yeah.
flattering, super great, awesome, but also very stressful. I did not love speaking in front of people at the time, but I got up there and I have this very blurry picture from this event that I use in a lot, but I killed it. And I don't even like to say that because I don't like language that is violent, but I did so well. And for me at that moment, it was the best one I had ever did. People were laughing, they were nodding their heads, they were taking notes. My outfit was on point, which sounds hilarious, but you feel more confident and in your own ownership of your space and your ideas. And I walked out of the room into a hallway at this Marriott or whatever it was. And I thought I was by myself, I'm a person who sweats when they speak in public like crazy. I am also a person who my heart rate really increases. I get very frazzled. So I definitely need a decompress afterwards. But I walked in the hallway. I'm just a mess. And I said, holy shit, this has got to be what Beyonce feels like. Those were my exact words. I've never forgot them. I slightly tweak them when I tell this story, depending on the audience, because I don't want to curse or I want to be respectful. But behind me, the owner of that business had followed me out and heard me say it, which wholly embarrassing in the moment. But he giggled and he said, you tell us what you need. We'll hire you tomorrow. Now I said, I need to go to my hotel room. Like there's so much adrenaline in me right now. Thank you. I would love to chat with you. Now, ultimately, I did not take the job. North Carolina was not the place for me. By the way, I loved North Carolina. It's a lot like Portland in many visual ways and food ways. But I knew in that exact moment, from the time Beyonce came out of my mouth to the time he said, what do you need? I knew two things. Number one, in that exact moment, I had found my purpose. And I had been looking for it for 30 plus years at that point, right? I'd read every book, everything. But I knew in that moment that was it. But I also knew that I had currency and value. And so I knew that day I was going to quit my job. It took some time. There were some finagling and some things that had to happen. And all of that kind of got put into motion very shortly afterwards. And then I started my business behind the scenes. And I didn't know anything. I didn't know how to build a website, or I didn't know so many things, but I just started doing it on the nights and weekends and doing it in advance of me leaving the company, and took every opportunity to speak and to build that practice and expanded what I spoke on, and really started speaking about a lot of things related to women or that were important to women, and was getting sought after for that and that ability to do that. And it changed my life. And I want to preface this because we have been very open in this conversation. I do not have a single bad word to say about that company. That company, the first time gave me a career, and the second time gave me a purpose. How can I say anything bad about them? I loved what I did there. I believed in the product we were selling, the services we were selling, and I believed in the passion of the people that were there that wanted to make it a success. That is unique. It is so unique. I cannot state it enough, to feel that way about a company that you got to grow up in. And so nothing bad, but it also speaks to how one bad apple or one bad situation, because there were other things that happened with individuals there, to what we talked about in your experiences and things like that. But they were never that lightning rod. And you never know what that lightning rod is going to be, somebody, because especially women, historically, we have had to take our knocks on the head and keep going. And so we've built up calluses and bruises and defense mechanisms and all of these things. And I think some of those are related to how we perceive our own value and the confidence that we have and the abilities that we have, right? It's because those calluses are over those wounds. Those wounds are not gone. And so I did want to preface that about the company. I technically don't even have ill will towards that leader. They know what they know, right?
Energy. It's not worth your energy to hold
Exactly. Right? Exactly. Yeah. And what it pointed out for me is knowing when you've gotten everything you can get out of a person, an experience, a place, an opportunity. That doesn't mean go in, bleed people and companies dry, but it means, oh, I've learned what I'm going to learn here. And if I'm going to continue in my journey, in my purpose, in what I have that's unique to contribute and make the world a better place, I have to go experience more somewhere else. And it's not easy. It's very difficult, whether it's your own business or another company, right? The grass is not always greener in all areas. There's brown patches everywhere. But it did give me satisfaction and conviction
Mm.
that it is okay to leave something that is no longer serving you.
Yep.
And I think that's a lesson that's so important for people. It is the catalyst for this podcast. It is the catalyst for my business, Eliminate Girl Hate. And I invited you to speak because you were so crucial to that journey. Ooh. But also one of the seeds for building that confidence in a person. And I don't think we tell people that enough. I don't think that while we should not be looking for external validation, we should certainly be validating people in their purpose. And we should certainly be validating good behavior, right? That changes your life and changes your world and opens you up to possibilities you never imagined, because not everybody has a childhood or an education or cheerleader
Mm-hmm.
when they are young that says to them, are you happy?
Mm-hmm.
And what do you think you're good at? Or what are those things? Those conversations don't happen for a lot of people. And so I think it is important to recognize that. But I also know that to get to that level of you being able to do that for someone else means this emotion is probably in you somewhere.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
And all of those audio files that are out there, and I forget the word, but they like hate the little and those sound effects that we naturally make. So I'm sure a person speaking through tears sounds really good to audio files. And that is me deflecting to catch myself. But I also thought that it was a nice bookend of the journey. And no one thing comes with all good and all bad. And it's about how you embrace those and use them to impart more good in the places that you land.
Yeah.
And that is why I own this business. That is why I'm doing a podcast that is in a lot of ways very uncomfortable. We only give permission to celebrities and famous people to talk like this out loud, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to say thank you for believing in your own powers to help other people find their own. I think that's a beautiful gift, and probably one that requires a lot of self-sacrifice in some ways to do. And so thank you.
I am very flattered by your kind words. I am in constant awe of your brilliance and in your growth and in your just honesty and calling it out and talking through and recognizing in a moment where you've pushed and your values have brought you to that place of success to only be diminished by someone who has done less, to recognize, okay, no, this is not where I belong, takes courage and strength that will suit you well in life. And wouldn't it be brilliant if there was some, through this, and the ripple effect of the work that you're doing, an opportunity to build mentorship for women, to help them see their strengths, to create a community of champions and cheerleaders so that so many others who really are struggling with the same thing, whether they're just beginning work or they've been doing it for a long time, but they're not doing what they love doing or they feel less than, to have that mentor, but to have that opportunity to try and to grow and to recognize your strength. Because in that moment, when you're on that stage and 400 people are there and they love what you're doing and you're like, okay, validation. I got this, and I don't know what it's going to turn into or where I'm going to land, but this is my path. And there is incredible power in that. And there is, from what I've experienced, always great things that happen.
Yeah, certainly.
Whatever, you're going to fall down, get up, dust yourself off, and be better from it. It's another step when your journey to growth or another patch in your quilt of life, and recognizing it for, okay, that boss did a really yucky thing. That's on him, the yucky part. It helped me see what my true
Yeah.
value was, right? And that perspective, like realizing in that moment, you have control over your perspective of life. And if your perspective is in any way diminishing your authentic self, diminishing what you know in your gut you're capable of doing, then it's okay to walk away from it. And
Yeah.
women need to know that. And it really creates a very healthy unlock that is very empowering. And you will continue to come across people, men and women, who will diminish your brilliance.
Yeah.
And it's a reflection of them. It is not a reflection of you.
Totally.
Recognizing that is something that takes practice.
Oh,
Because
certainly. Certainly.
daughter on things. But then I realized as I'm coaching her, I need to practice it too. And it is probably a lifelong practice that we all need to be prepared to do, take care of ourselves, number one, so that we can be the best sisters, friends, podcasters, fill in the blank, whatever, you want to be. The possibilities are endless.
And just to bookend that as well, it's also about realizing there isn't actually a box. Like,
Mhm.
a lot of people, I've done a lot of speaking with younger people on purpose and passion. And, my passion is not standing in front of an audience and speaking. My knees still buckle. The very first time I spoke, you may not remember this, but you made me speak at a meeting in the auditorium at Oakley. And I wore a dress because I thought that's what you did. I'm not really a dress girl, but that's what I did. And my knees were buckling. And all of the men in the front row, including Scott, who was our VP of marketing, they kept lunging like towards me because they thought I was going to fall. And I learned not to wear a skirt when I present because my knees still do that, right? And it's all these years later. I've spoken internationally. I've spoken in an audience of thousands of people. It
Mhm.
still happens. It doesn't matter, right? But so it wasn't about speaking in public. That wasn't what the purpose was. But it was certainly about giving voice to others and especially women, right? It was, I say, people hate when I say this, but it's about speaking to, for, and about women or those who identify as such, right?
People hate when you say it. You want to say
Um,
it. You want to
it's,
re-articulate it.
I think people dislike how simplistic it is, right? They're like, no, you've got to make it fancier, use some more adjectives and things like that. If you tell somebody that's your passion, you're never going to get a job and you're never going to get that, which I still use it all the time. It's in my bio, it's everywhere. But it very much is this concept we talk about what we want to be when we grow up from our earliest age, right? But it's always about positions that exist already or
Mhm.
constructs that exist already. And if we talked instead about what people love to do and what they're good at doing,
Yep.
like for me, it was talking.
Yep.
Okay, at 6 months old, there's stuff in my baby book about how much I talk. My
Mhm.
entire existence was about how much I talked. It was on report cards, it was everywhere, right? But if I had instead focused on talking, I could have looked at a myriad of opportunities for a career without realizing what that is and how that works. And so I think we're just broken in how we look at those things
There's a
and
different,
realizing that value.
the resources that should be available for children to have exposure to different things so that they can find whatever it is that draws them in. I wanted to be
Yeah.
a ballerina when I was
Yep.
little. We couldn't afford classes. I remember thinking about that and drawing pictures about it. And then in high school, Mrs. Miller opened up a communications class. And in that communications class, she decided she wanted to pilot a peer mediation program. And I was one of the 10 children that were selected to be trained on how to mediate peers. Their concept was a peer could diffuse a situation better than an adult who comes in with power. And that was the unlock for me. People have different perspectives.
Yeah.
People have different ways they want to solve things. And That's been an anchor in my, or through line in my journey to this day because of Mrs. Miller.
That I love that so much. Shout out, Miss Miller. Um, I am going to, we could probably talk for hours just because number one, it's interesting. But number two, we really have only had one conversation in 15 years. There's a lot. But I want to close it out and give you, we only booked a certain amount of time and we're coming close to that. Is there anything that you feel like it's just on your heart and you're like, I want to say this to whoever is listening to this about anything that we talked about today?
Sure. Well, first, thank you. I am again in awe of what you're doing. I love this concept, and Eliminate Girl Hate is a powerful initiative. I think that it has tremendous relevance in today's ecosystem. I love that you listened to your friends who encouraged you to do a podcast, and you broke through your fear of doing it and figured it out and are bringing it to fruition. I would say what's important to me as a final thing is I think that women and men who are advocates for women, I think need to find their power. I think they need to recognize there is something special. Everybody has it. You're capable of doing something better than everybody else. Figure out what it is, nurture it. Ask for mentorship. Ask people who you admire if they would be a mentor, and you'll find often that they are flattered to do so. I would also encourage you people in general statement of watch others. Watch how they interact, watch how they respond in situations, and decide what you want to learn from that, both what you want to emulate and what you don't want to emulate. I think you can learn a lot and save yourself some bumps and bruises by watching others. Recognize the value of being true to yourself, good to yourself, taking care of yourself physically, emotionally, spiritually, in whatever way is meaningful for you as a priority one. When you are healthy and happy, and it's a lifelong journey, then you are a better friend, lover, parent, employer, employee, whatever, everything in life. So that really should be a priority one, and value the trust that people have in you. When you have those moments of emotional charge, it's okay to walk away and reset. I love some of the women leaders that I've worked with who say, let me noodle on that for a little bit. And it was an approach that was introduced to me, when I was 40. I wish I would have had sooner. So take that time and go out and do great things. And when people try to put you down, recognize that's a reflection of them. And maybe they're threatened by you. Maybe they're not. Maybe they're just jerks. But recognize it's them. You are the one that is accountable for yourself, and you answer to yourself. And I'm so grateful for this time with you.
Right back at you. Very grateful. Thank you so much. Love it. Love you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, back at you. I'm a super fan of the work that you're doing. If there's anything else I can do to support you, please do not hesitate to let me know.
Awesome. I will. Thank you so much, Becky. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure, Dawn.
All right.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
You too.
How many times have you heard the words workplace and culture used together and found yourself rolling your eyes at the thought? Believe me, I'm with you. I'll be honest. As I record this, I just rolled my eyes. That's because the word culture has become homogenized in such a way that they actually had us believing ping pong tables and pizza were symbolic of a good place to work. COVID changed that. Remote work was a success in the eyes of many, and as such, our ideas of what constitutes a good workplace culture have changed, and it boils down to one crucial element: equity. Now, don't you roll your eyes again on me. It's true. The expectation of employees is that they have a work environment and culture that works for them, regardless of who they are. No more cookie cutter swag and Pizza Hut deliveries, mandatory after hours, happy hours, and all of the other things they do to make us feel like we're a family. This is especially true for women. Remote work gave many more hours in the day, the flexibility to feel more productive and present, and a choice in how and what style of work is best for who they are and what they do. This is at the core of what equity means, because the old way was made for one group of people. And this is where Eliminate Girl Hate comes in. We help create safe and equitable spaces for girls and women, and we help the companies that employ them be more profitable in the process. Not rolling your eyes anymore, are you? Check us out at eliminategirlhate.com. Use code WAITHOLDUPWHAT in your contact form for a free consultation call and see how we can help you and your business. Have you ever dreamed of writing a book? I know I have. Or maybe, also like me, you've started a manuscript. Maybe you've started 10 and you've just never finished it, or never let anybody else read it, or never thought you could publish it. Wherever you are in the process, Jim Woods would like to help. Jim's a writer just like you, but he's also a coach who loves helping writers bring their books into the world and make them a reality. If you are like me, sometimes you need that push, a supportive but demanding cohort along the way to put your stories out into the world and keep you on track. Jim Woods is that cohort. Visit jimwoodswrites.com and click the Let's Chat button. Mention our podcast for a free clarity call and get your story out into the world because we need it. So a few years ago, I was introduced to this concept of supportive yet demanding communities. And I really loved it because it basically was this idea that you don't want to have detractors in your circle that are constantly telling you all of the ways in which you don't measure up, or which you're not doing well, or you're not succeeding, or just kind of being a regular old downer. But also, you don't want people that are cheering you on so hard that they can't be objective to what you need in order for you to push forward or to move past something, or to maybe even just live in what you're supposed to live in or succeed at your highest level. And so the concept being that a supportive and demanding community is the one that lifts you up, that tells you how amazing you are, that reminds you of all of your strengths, but can also help you when maybe you're getting off track, or maybe you're just being lazy, or you're not doing what you need to do, right? And it's all given with this love and this support, with this idea that they all want you to win. And it's awesome because I feel like sometimes we're sensitive as human beings. I know I am. And you don't maybe want to hear the bad things, but you need to hear the bad things because otherwise people are honestly lying to you. If you don't hear bad things from the people that you love occasionally, or I don't even want to call them bad, but if they don't challenge you or they don't push you, then they're not being truthful with you. And then you start to build up all these ideas that maybe you don't trust people because you don't know what's real and what's not. And so I say this because I loved what we just talked about with Becky. You know, she was a boss at a time in my life where I didn't know what I was going to do or who I was going to be and what that meant or what that looked like. And she was super supportive, as you heard in the episode, and she sang my praises and she did those things. But she gave me things to do that pushed me. They pushed me beyond my limit. They made me question sometimes, can I do this? But her faith in me was so strong that I just did it. And I went in. And I think that's what we need in our culture, right? Is these supportive and yet demanding communities. These people that are going to push us outside of our comfort zone, but also catch us when we trip. And I'm not saying fall here, because if we've already fallen, it's taken too long. And so it's there. I don't know, maybe that's not even right. Maybe you're supposed to fall. I'm not the psychological expert, but you want people in like a trust fall. You want people that are going to catch you before your head hits the ground. And I think that's really what Becky was for me. And that's why I wanted her to be the first guest, because I never got an opportunity to tell her that. I never got an opportunity to, or I never felt like I had the opportunity to support her back. Maybe because I just didn't know how to do it. It was so early in my career. And to be able to go back 15 years later and say, here's the impact you had on my life. It meant something to me, but I know it meant something to her as well, because sometimes we don't get to hear those things. And I am here to tell you, we need more of that. Remind people of how beautiful they are, how amazing they are, how smart they are, how funny they are, how supportive or capable they are. All of these things that tend to dig in and doubt or create doubt for ourselves, right? And this whole concept of imposter syndrome, and you can't see me, but I'm putting it in quotes right now. A lot of times that comes out of this absence of being reminded of our value and worth. And look, I'm not saying that we should seek validation in other people. We obviously have to build up our own internal ways of pep talking ourselves and in believing in ourselves. And those are great. But sometimes in life, it's hard to do that. So sometimes we're in the middle of darkness, or maybe it's not even that dark, no pun intended, but maybe pun intended. But you're in that period of time where you forget in your own power. You forget about it, right? Maybe you've had a few hits along the way or a few rejections, and it's harder to be reminded or to be confident in who you are and the power and the abilities that you have. And so those supportive and demanding communities, those are the ones that remind you. And it's not about validation. It's about a reminder. So I want to thank Becky for being our first guest. I'm truly honored and humbled by that. And I want to thank you for listening to our first episode. I hope you will continue to listen as we explore these conversations about life and about how we navigate it. And look, we're not here to be the answer or the gospel or the truth, if you will. We're just here to be people that tell our stories, talk about what we've learned, and hopefully impact, help, or provide a less lonely space for other people going through similar situations. So until next time, thanks for listening to Wait, Hold Up, What? A podcast from the Women at Eliminate Girl Hate. We'll see you next time.